Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be doing half tech review and half Dorico because I'm going to be talking about MIDI input into Dorico. So if you haven't been using a MIDI keyboard when you're working in Dorico, you're really missing out on possibly the best productivity tool you have to offer when it comes to a music notation software. Now there's several different types of MIDI input devices, but the grand majority of them are in the keyboard shape. The MIDI keyboard itself is very convenient because it has access to several different notes and multiple octaves, and it's a pretty universal system that just about everybody understands, whereas like a wind controller, you'd have to know how to play saxophone for that to even make sense. Now, depending on your operating system, Windows versus Mac, this can be a really simple process with no drivers all the way up to needing to download a very specific driver for the device. The keyboard I want to show you here and how it applies to Dorico is this iRig 49 by iKMultimedia. Now, I'm not here trying to get you to buy this particular item, but if you're trying to tiptoe your way into MIDI input in Dorico, this is a really great tool, and it's relatively inexpensive, especially when you think about all the things it comes with. If you've watched some of my other videos on tech stuff in Dorico, you know what a big proponent I am also of having good speakers so you can hear what you're playing back in Dorico, and you have a much better idea of what the music sounds like. And one of the advantages of a device like this is it actually has a built-in audio interface. So if you don't already own an audio interface and you're looking to get speakers, audio interface, MIDI keyboard, that really adds up to a lot of money. But this particular keyboard actually can act as an audio interface, and so you can plug a set of studio monitors or better computer speakers right into this keyboard, and so you only need one USB plug, which is pretty amazing. The other thing that this has is it actually has a single mic input with phantom power. And the sound you're hearing in my voice, I'm actually recording this with the iKMultimedia. And so this is actually the sound of the preamp built into the keyboard. So again, with one USB cord, you can have MIDI, you can have audio in and out, which means you have far less on your desk and you have to pay far less in all these different items. Now, when we take a look at the iKMultimedia, you can see we have 49 keys, which is actually a really handy number when you think about it. We have middle C here, but then we have two C's below that, as well as two C's above that. And what that gives us is the complete range of, say, a big band, because the lowest note on your bari sax is going to be the C below bass clef, and the highest note typically of a normal trumpet section is going to be around that C above the staff. And so you don't have to go into the settings to transpose up an octave and move notes around very much, because you literally have a really practical range, but you can see the whole unit itself is only about 24 inches wide, which means it'll fit on your desk next to, say, your keyboard. And for comparison, you can see when I put the Apple keyboard next to it, it's not that much bigger than the actual keyboard itself, which means if you have a decent-sized desk, you probably have room for this device. It also has drum pads up here, so if you're used to using your DAW to input drum notes, it's kind of a handy feature, and you can also utilize these in Dorico. It also has the other features that you might expect in a MIDI controller. It has the pitch bend wheel here, which is actually a touch-sensitive pad, and you can see as I run my finger up and down it, it adjusts the level of the pitch bend. We also have the modulation wheel, which is the same kind of touchpad. And I'll tell you, these are actually pretty darn responsive. So if you're just tiptoeing into using MIDI devices like this, it's actually a pretty darn handy way of doing it. We also have the octave transposition, so when we go up or down, that means all the keys on the keyboard are moved up or down an octave, so that way we don't have to go fishing around in Dorico to transpose notes. We can literally just move the whole thing up an octave and put in our piccolo parts and flute parts, and then we can go down an octave from standard, and we can put in our tuba parts and other things that would be below the standard range of the keyboard. Now, I've used other sort of portable rigs like this. I have an X Keys 37, which is really great and super portable. But with 37 keys, I always find that halfway through a part, I'm going to have to transpose up and down an octave, and it's not quite a big enough spread to do like a whole horn section. So I'll have to do like the trumpets and the trombones separately because I can't use the entire spread at once. Beyond that, the iKMultimedia uses these kind of proprietary USB cords, and you can see it has sort of this kind of funky end on it that is proprietary to the device, and then the other side is some form of connector. Now, one of the nice features of this is if you're using iPad version of Dorico, this has a lightning connector, a USB-C, which I have plugged into my laptop here, as well as just standard USB-A. And so if you want to use it with your laptop, with your PC, with your iPad, or with your MacBook, it has a connector that comes right with it. And it actually powers the device. You do not need extra power in addition to just those plugs, but you can also put in batteries in the bottom so that if you do have a low-powered USB port and it's not self-powered, you can actually use the batteries in the bottom of the device, which will power the unit. Now, these are replaceable batteries, not a built-in one, but it hardly uses any electricity, so those batteries last a really long time. So now that I've shown you sort of the basics of it, let's see how it applies to Dorico directly. Okay, so I've got an orchestral score pulled up here in Dorico, and I'm going to be showing you how I can utilize this MIDI keyboard to do some note entry into Dorico. Now, I'm going to be doing another video soon where I'm going to be showing you a whole lot more about how to make use of MIDI in Dorico, but for today, we're going to use the most basic features. And to be clear, this is 99% of what the purpose of the MIDI keyboard is for, which is note entry and also part creation, meaning if I want to get these notes into this part versus that part, this really speeds you up, and it can take a kind of seemingly daunting task that you have to do over and over again and make it really quick and really easy. Okay, so here we are in Dorico. So let's say we want to put in some string pads into this orchestral score. Now, some of you might still be clicking on the measure here and then going into the right tool and then choosing your note value with the mouse, and then finding the spot on the stave where you want the note and inserting it like that. And of course that works, but that's a whole lot of steps that we can really simplify with the keyboard. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to add in the other staves of the string section, and we're going to enter all of these notes of the chord at once. So when we go into the right tool by clicking there on the first thing in the measure and hitting the return key, you'll see that the caret activates. And if we hold down the shift key and push down, then you'll see that we can highlight all of the other staves in this group. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to put in one note per stave on the MIDI keyboard. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in like a C major chord. Now that I have all the different staves selected, what I'm going to do is on the MIDI keyboard, I'm going to play a C major chord. So I'm going to choose my notes and my voicing. So let's say I'm going to do a 5-1-5 on the top, and then I'm going to do the third and the octave on the bottom. And so I'm going to get a nice big spread. Now you can see that Dorico automatically put in the notes from the chord voicing I just played from top to bottom. So the top stave gets the highest note, the bottom stave gets the lowest note. And that way I ended up with a nice full chord. Now, as you're working in this kind of setup, you can also put in unison notes by just simply pressing down one key, and it'll still input all of those notes into all 5 staves. So let's say I wanted to have them all play a low G. It would automatically insert that note into all 5 staves at once. Now, because the double bass is so much lower than the cello and the viola, obviously I may want to take that note down an octave, but at least I got it in there. So if I was going to do, say, a run of 8th notes in unison, I could hit 5 on my keyboard, which selects the eighth notes there, and then I could do just a very simple run. And you can see it inputted all the notes into all the staves simultaneously. And all I would have to do is hit escape to get out of that tool, and I could just select all these notes in the bass part and then transpose them down an octave, and voila, now I have a full orchestrated 5-part string section by just using the keyboard. And I do this all the time. So if I wanted to come up here to my brass section, for example, and I wanted to put in sort of a complex rhythmic part in the trombones, I could go ahead and select the eighth note again. I'm going to hit shift and go down, and I'm going to select the 4 trombones, and then I'm going to create my chords. So we're going to do a C major chord. So it might be this. And remember that the space bar moves the caret over one of the unit you have selected. So because I had eighth note selected, it moved the caret over by 1/8 note. And you can see I very quickly got all the notes of the trombone section inserted with very little work. I didn't have to pick which one it was. I didn't have to go and fish around with the mouse to try and find what note or what line I'm on, because the MIDI keyboard tells Dorico exactly which pitch to put in. And so let's say I was working in the flute section and I needed to put in some really high notes. So if I go ahead and go into the piccolo part, I can hit the octave transpose up button. So now when I put in my eighth note line, you can see it inputted the notes in the correct octave because the piccolo transposes that treble clef up an octave by default. And then when I go down into the flute part, you'll see, because I have it transposed up twice, it allows me to play in a very comfortable register on the keyboard, but it'll input the notes at that higher level for me. Another great thing to use the MIDI keyboard for is if you want to overwrite notes, like if you want to change the notes but not change the rhythm, you can highlight a section in our music, and I can go ahead and copy it. I'm going to hit the R key, which will repeat it to the next measure. And then if I hit enter to get into the right tool, and I hit the L key, now I can go in and I can put in different pitches with the same rhythm. And you can see Dorico overwrote those pitches, and all I had to do was play them in on the keyboard. Now, the other thing you can do is you can actually input notes as if you're playing them. So if you're a decent keyboard player, we could say, click on measure 4 here, and then I could go over here and I could hit this record button up by the playback tools. So now I can start playing. And you can see it inputted the notes for me. Now, Dorico does have some control over this with an option called Quantization. And what Quantization does is if we go under the preferences of Dorico and we go down to play, you will see there's a quantization section. And what this means is that Dorico will make everything into a eighth note or larger depending on how bad my piano skills are. So if I don't play my performance very well, it'll actually make it so it'll make them into eighth notes because it knows I was trying to play eighth notes and I just came close. You can also set it to 16th notes if you're doing something more complicated. You can have it look for triplets, aka tuplets, and then you can also have it listen for grace notes as well. That system works really well, but I do have to say with a caveat that you'll probably have to go back and clean up the performance you did when you played it in on the keyboard until you get used to how to kind of operate in this MIDI world. But if you're doing something simple like entering a melody, it can really speed you up to do it in real time. So that's about it for this short introduction into MIDI, but also showcasing this iRig 49. Again, it's a really great tool. It works very, very well. And for the price that I paid, which was about $260, it has the features of an audio interface. I can plug a mic in and do a voiceover, as well as it has MIDI through USB, which is really handy. And if you're not doing a whole lot of recording, let's face it, you don't necessarily need a very fancy audio interface. We just need to be able to hook some better speakers up so we can really hear the playback from Dorico. So check back to the channel so you can see my other videos when I dive a little bit deeper into the MIDI features here in Dorico and how we can make use of those in both playback and in note entry. And remember, if you do already have a keyboard but you haven't hooked it up to your computer yet, give it a shot. It is a really handy tool. If you're a Windows user, you probably need to download some drivers. If you're a Mac user, chances are it'll just work right out of the box. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.